Welcome to the Business of Sound. My name is David Segura. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Glassbox Media and host for this podcast. Our hope for this show is to give people an inside look into the business of podcasting and provide actionable advice to make your podcast or your podcast campaign more successful. On this episode, I'm joined by my co-founder and Glassbox Media's Chief Strategy Officer, Chris Whitman. We're speaking with some of the first podcasters Glassbox Media ever signed. We have Tim Pilleri, Lance Reenstierna, and Jennifer Amell, the co-creators of the podcast Crawlspace and Missing. Tim and Lance first met when creating comedy dinner theater shows. In 2013, they came together to shoot the documentary about the disappearance of Maura Murray. They started a podcast to raise awareness about the case in 2015 called Missing Maura Murray. The podcast was wildly successful and even spawned an Oxygen documentary and led to a podcast media company of their very own called Crawlspace Media. We connected with them in 2021 and subsequently signed them to the Glassbox Media family, which helped establish our true crime slate. Super excited to have this conversation today.
Us too. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, what a pleasure.
And may I compliment your radio voice? You just
So
turned
smooth.
it on. This is great.
You know where it dates back to? Not the most glamorous story, but it's a true story. High school debate.
Oh, there you go.
So very much still a nerd, just in a different format, but I immediately think of performance, whether it's podcasting or radio. Hopefully it still sounds authentic to that audience out there, but yeah, I do have a radio voice, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, you should.
Nice.
Yeah, well enunciated.
Yeah.
Just to kick things off, I mean, thanks so much for traveling out this way, and thanks to our friends here at Spotify. We're excited to be recording from the Brooklyn studios, and Spotify is just an amazing partner, and you know, shout out to them for having us.
Yeah. Shout out Spotify. What's up?
And this equipment is amazing. I usually when we record it at home, it's like all remote now, and it's through Zoom or Riverside. So we got our own setups, and I'm just so used to having like my clunky, big, fuzzy mic like on my face, and I don't even know where to sit right now.
It's a bit unnatural.
It is like I feel like I have a stiff neck.
Unnatural in a good way, I'll add.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
Yeah, this is
That's
beautiful.
a great
studio.
space. Yeah, so there's so many things we can talk about, but just to kick it off and to keep it relatively informal, I do want to hear about the, story between you three. How did you all link up? Already alluded to it a little bit, but more of the backstory.
Okay.
You might as well start with the murder mystery comedy dinner theater.
Yeah, I think so. So that goes back to 2001 or 2001. That goes back to when we met. You were doing it before.
Yeah.
With the troupe, and I met through a mutual friend, and then we started doing these crazy murder mystery comedy dinner theater shows, which were a lot of fun, and they were done in New England, mostly like restaurants in rural New England, and it was a great time. I know from my perspective as an actor, I came in and got paid, I think, $50 and got like a little toasty during the performance, and it was a blast, and we just had so much fun. And then we'd usually stay over and just kind of party, and a real bond formed there with the troupe, and we did it for several years, and there was, I don't know how many different plays yet.
Oh, there was
Yeah, what was the most popular play?
We had like a dozen shows, and I think the most popular one was our probably our disco show, Murder at the Flaming Feet.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was probably the most performed and most popular. One of the funniest ones though was the Murderitaville, where it was an island retreat for people who were sex addicts. So the goal of writing that script was to format the plot so like all the mysteries were like legit. There were clues. It was all that. But with this particular script, the goal was to have every single line be a double entendre, like a sexual innuendo, and it was absolutely amazing. It was hilarious. So that
Were all
worked
the things sexual innuendos?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a lot of crowd work. The crowd gets like an envelope, and they'll become part of the show, and they'll read some of it. And yeah, it's a little bit like what we do today in that there are clues throughout the show, and the audience can put the story together themselves. They can find out who the killer is before the performance is up if they're sharp enough.
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of like the This is the reality version. It's like the cartoon version.
Yeah.
The murder mystery dinner theaters. But it was fun, and I remember, I say this all the time, but it's hilarious. I remember us talking, like the group talking and saying something. I don't remember the exact age, but we were like, God, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 40. And then like we turned 40 and we're like, I would give anything to do that again.
Life is funny like that.
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah.
We'll go back to that in a second.
And what about Jen? When did Jen come into the picture?
She responded to a Craigslist ad.
Excellent. What was
Woman
the,
wanted.
What was the listing?
Woman wanted. That was it.
Yeah.
Experience needed.
Must
Yeah.
bring zip ties.
Right. No, I actually was a fan of you guys. I listened to Missing Maura Murray for a long time and respected the work that you guys did. And I was like, man, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found a story in my town I went to high school in. It was crazy murder. It was like half of a woman that was found in a suitcase. And so I brought this story to these guys, and they let me produce like a 5-part series on it, and the rest is history.
Oh,
And
nice.
what was it? What's the timeline on that? Because Missing Maura Murray, that was 2015.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah. We started working on the Maura Murray documentary in 2013. We went to Canada in 2013, but we didn't start the podcast until the summer of 2015. And it pretty much took off right away. And then we had already launched Crawlspace in 2017 when I want to say it was maybe 2019 that Jen reached out.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Very cool.
Mhm.
So just to dive into that then, did the podcasts come before the collaboration with Oxygen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did? Very cool.
Yeah. Essentially, Oxygen's producers found the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for a cold case. They were looking for material out there.
Yeah, there's a production company called Texas Crew Productions, and they make some great shows. They got a Hulu show on now. I think it's called Web of Death. Good people over there. And they reached out to us very early in our run of Missing Maura Murray. I want to say like episode 10
Yeah.
or something
wow.
like that. Yeah.
I'm laughing because like that was our introduction into this. We had like 10 episodes, and we're like, people want to do a TV show, and then the TV show's
amazing.
made.
Well,
That's
Oxygen
unheard of.
Oxygen wasn't even a true crime network
Right.
at that time. So we were told, we were like, listen, you can't let this out, but Oxygen is like, Oprah's known as Oprah's network, and now it's going to undergo a whole rebrand where it's going to be true crime only, and they want this show, they want your podcast and this to be a TV show, one of the first ones. And they were like, trust us, this doesn't happen all the time,
I'll say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to set the table for that then, because one thing that I find really fascinating about that, and hopefully the audience can relate to this as well, is the future of podcasting is basically creating amazing IP, like this show, other shows you've done like Missing, etc., and then, adapting that, whether we're talking about a book or a TV show. You guys just kind of like skipped that, pioneered it, and did it all simultaneous. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. It did happen quickly, yeah.
Okay. There's so much more to talk about. We're going to cover a lot of ground, especially around audio and podcasting in particular. But I know a lot of folks are curious to learn a little bit more about adaptations. So I'm curious to know, like, what was it like, dealing with Oxygen, essentially dealing with a massive media company. And I guess to complicate it further, I mean, that's a hell of a thing to rebrand from Oprah, literally a goddess in media,
Yeah.
to something that's very different. Couldn't have been easy for them. So literally being one of their first partners, what was that experience like for you?
It was great. I mean, it was really fun to go to 30 Rock and to go into meetings with producers over there and see the floor and be interviewed over there and things like that. Like I think it's probably safe to say we felt like big shots every time we went to 30 Rock.
100%. 100% felt like big shots. And just like we got, free, our expenses paid to the first Crime Con because it was like the launch of everything with Oxygen. Oxygen's a huge sponsor to Crime Con. So it was like, you guys, it's on, like we were the bells of the ball. And then the subsequent years were like, oh, we're not getting our stuff comped anymore.
We're not comped.
We're not, okay. But the whole experience of like working with a television station like as big as like NBC owned Oxygen and Texas Crew, just the reality of like the unreality of reality TV kind of set in not slowly, but once you came to terms with it, once you came to grips with the fact that like Oh, they kind of don't really. Well, they do want the information, but they want the information about the disappearance on their terms. Because I remember the first time that they shot with us, we had it all set up, like we're ready to go. We got the details of maps, like we're ready. And they're like, no, not yet, nope. And then it got to the point where they'd have to come in and be like, okay, just literally say these things.
Yeah,
You need to just say these things to get by.
Wow.
yeah,
but it was
fun.
good.
And how many takes did that require?
A few.
A few, yeah.
Each time, yeah. I mean, but it was, they never gave us lines or anything like that. It was all our ideas and things. But I think dealing with the lawyers at Oxygen was really interesting too, because we were doing like review episodes for the TV show. So when the TV show aired that evening, there were 6 episodes. We would do like a live show, like recap show, and they promoted it on Oxygen. And occasionally there was some issues with their lawyers, needing us to not go as far as we wanted to go. I think with certain things, so that was a little bit of a learning curve for us. Yeah.
I can imagine. And then I guess jumping forward, eventually you all decide to build Crawlspace Media. Obviously very audio and podcast centric, but obviously bigger than that too. What was that experience like, kicking off other shows as well after branching out from Maura Murray?
Yeah.
We were just talking on the way over here just about like the purpose of creating something like Crawlspace Media, and it was because we're independent podcast producers, and we had a lot of friends that were independent podcast producers. And once the show on Maura Murray, once that aired and it was done, you start to just see like your show dropping down the charts a little bit because it's just losing the popularity, and that's it's just comes with the territory. But we had a lot of friends like in this mid area where they were really successful shows, but they weren't like the top 10 shows, but they were successful enough. So we figured that it wasn't so much like we're going to help you produce it on a like technical production level. We would answer questions to the best of our knowledge, help you get through like any questions you had on editing. That it was like a co-elevation of like-minded individuals who are independently producing.
Yeah, we'd make introductions with the shows that we brought on, and they were just shows that we liked, and that creators that we liked, or shows, or both, that we personally listened to and wanted to join, band together with. Yeah, it was great, and so we would make introductions, help them get monetized, and to the best of our capability. And so that was pretty much it. It was more of a co-elevation, I think, is the word. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have always seemed incredibly collaborative, I feel like, in the true crime space. And even last year, Glassbox being at CrimeCon for the first time as sponsors, just kind of like seeing everybody. You guys all know each other. Jen, I know you weren't there, and that was a bummer.
I know.
But it's just like the true crime space in general kind of requires collaboration. It seems like you guys have just done an amazing job galvanizing community. What's that been like for helping grow your shows? Co-elevation. You mentioned. I would imagine a lot of like guest swapping, a lot of barter swaps with like trailers, things like that. What's that experience been like? I guess both within Crawlspace, but also externally.
Sure. I mean, I think it's really fun. I think it's a job that not that many people have. So I think we can naturally relate to other creators. So yeah, I guess that's been really fun. I would say like promo swaps and stuff like that. We didn't really have a great handle on the organization of that until we met you guys, and we did do a lot of like guest spots on other shows, and we would always have podcasters on our shows because we figured if someone's listening to one podcast, they're listening to more than one. I don't think there's anyone who just listens to one podcast. So that was kind of fun, but I feel like that's kind of come around too. Like you guys are really helpful in that now, where you're introducing us to people to have on, other creators, trying to get us on other shows, which is really helpful as well. We were doing this before we knew it was like the way to grow your show.
Yeah, and shout out to Nick and Rose at Glassbox for driving that forward. And
Big shout out. Yeah,
It's been huge, and I think the importance to that is where we were at when we tried to do it with our group of shows in our network, we tried everything. Like, I don't know if people really understand how difficult that this is. Like, you have a bunch of different people creating on different schedules similar content because it's in the same genre, but it's different enough where, you know, one listener will hear something that LA Not So Confidential puts out there, but it's different than what Murder Was the Case or Mind Over Murder. Like, it's same genre, but with the different schedules and the different personalities, and we tried to say, like, okay, well, you create your ad, and then it'll run on this show for these weeks, and this ad will run on this show for these weeks. And then if one person doesn't do it, or like they forget, or for whatever reason, then it's like, oh, well, the whole schedule's off. Okay, now what are we? So I don't know if people really do understand, like, how difficult it is to maintain the schedule. And that's just, again, shout out to Nick and Rose for like keeping track of that, because that's what you need. You need a strong internal, not department, but internal, you know, a couple of people just to maintain that, keep people on track.
Yeah, I think we'd agree with that. You know, there's huge media presence that's required. So I guess in the end, you'd agree that Glassbox dramatically made your lives incredible.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think
kidding,
that
but yeah.
another piece to this is that, like, podcasting is super democratized. Like, pretty much anyone could have a podcast. And I think due to that, it's kind of the Wild West of media. And so we rely on you guys and we rely on our peers to kind of ask questions like, are you doing this thing? Did it work out for you? And we're like always checking in that regard, because there's not one way to grow your podcast. But you guys do. You make your decisions like based on statistics and like data rather than like experiencing. You know, it's like we did this small tweak and now it went up like 5 listeners or whatever. It's like you guys have a pretty solid foundation to offer advice.
I think the data definitely helps a lot, but I do believe there's also some, you know, softer qualitative metrics as well. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the Maura Murray case and how that basically spawned Missing, but we haven't talked about your other show, Crawlspace, which is, you know, like, remind us all of the timeline when Crawlspace was created, and also just for the listeners how that's different, you know, as a true crime show compared to Missing.
Sure. Yeah, we launched Crawlspace, I think it was February 1st, 2017. And we started with the disappearance of Brianna Maitland. And we wanted to differentiate that case with Maura Murray's case, because a lot of times they're often kind of talked about at the same time. And that's because Maura disappeared February 2004, Brianna in New Hampshire, and Brianna disappeared in March of 2004 in Vermont, so about 80 miles away. Both of their cars were left on the side of the road. So there's some natural similarity, and they were, you know, young women, natural similarities where people go to that. So with what we were doing on Missing Maura Murray, Brianna's father actually started listening and enjoyed what we were doing. And him and his private investigator, who he has been working with since maybe 2005 or something like that, they contacted us and they were like, well, you know, could you guys do something like that for Brianna's case? We'd love to, you know. So we had several conversations with them over the course of a few months leading up to Crawlspace's release. And also Chloe Cantor was a big help. And now she works on the True Crime Twins podcast with her twin sister, Melina. So that all kind of happened in like the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And we did a lot of episodes on that case, and then we started branching off into authors and other interests in the same realm of mysteries and things like that, crime.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it was a interesting realization when we started to consider talking about other missing persons and other cold cases, especially when Bruce Maitland is like, can you cover my daughter Brianna? And then we realized the corner that we painted ourselves in by naming our show after a specific person. So that's one of the reasons, like, we want to have other conversations. We want to talk about other cases. We want to bring on people who know about other cases and also know about the psychology behind it.
Sure.
And we know that it's going to be heavy at times, but it allowed us to show a little bit more personality because we can have like more candid conversations with individuals who might have a sense of humor more than like the conversations that you'd have in the Maura Murray community. Like that
Right.
very. I remember the first time we had made a couple of jokes on Missing Maura Murray. I mean, the backlash was like, "You guys can't laugh." It's
No
like,
laughing.
Well, we can't. Like, it's life, man. I don't know what to tell you. It was a funny moment. Sorry, but yeah, that's where the name Crawlspace comes from, really.
To kind of speak to that, I guess, for all of you, like, how do you find, I guess, a need to basically inform and, kind of basically engage your audience, but at the same time balance that with victim advocacy? Like, has that been really challenging, and how do you think about that? Not just as a host, but Jen, you as a producer.
Jen doesn't have ethics.
Yeah, that's saying a lot, David. Yeah, I mean it's a balance for sure. I think it's like relatively new in the conversation about how to be an advocate as well as an entertainer. I know it's like ethics over entertainment. That's the phrase that's going
That's
around.
the T-shirt.
That's the T-shirt. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty natural if you're like a decent human being. It's like we can't sit and interview somebody who's experienced the worst tragedy of their lives and are detailing this thing to us and remain stoic or like laugh it off and stuff. We might do it behind the scenes just to like release tension or something, but there's always opportunities that present themselves to be an advocate, be it like, I mean, when we were working with our nonprofit, Private Investigations for the Missing, behind the scenes, we were like hooking families up with social media packages, like how to spread the word about their missing loved one. I mean, there's lots of stuff that goes on off air that kind of aids in that advocacy approach.
Yeah, even like a simple email. Like if I think of somebody who we had on a few months ago, and I'll just use like John Palmer, for example, about his wife Katie Palmer, who was hit by a truck. I'll just think about it. Be like, it doesn't take any time to just shoot an email and be like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing? Hope all's well." Like even that is like, I mean, that's advocacy. Like you're helping. They really, you get that email, and then they're like, someone's thinking of me. Like that's, you said community, like building the community, and that's huge. Like I didn't understand like the importance and the impact of like how a community can be so important in like every single aspect of your life. Like when you think community, you think like your neighborhood or something like that. You think like the literal sense of like my little town or something, but it isn't. It's like it's who you surround yourself with in different sections of your life, and it's huge.
Yeah. I think having family members on the show is a step towards that as well. I mean, that makes us feel good, I would say, because they want to be there. Like we're not twisting anybody's arm. You know, if someone is advocating for their loved one's murder or missing case online and they're reaching us, then we're probably going to have them on because what they're doing is inspiring to us. And frankly, it's interesting as well, you know, because they're working with the community and they also have this mystery. And so that's all of what we like to do on the show, all of what we like to help give exposure to.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you guys have gone through the timeline. You've been in podcasting for a long time at this point. You've seen a lot, I'm sure. You've seen it evolve. What's that journey been like? You know, Tim, not to get too graphic, but we were just in the bathroom talking about how you guys used to be partnered with Audio Boom.
I wasn't sure where that was going, by the way.
So this is what happens in men's
Yeah,
bathrooms.
exactly. Yeah.
What was it in the bathroom that reminded you about Audio Boom?
Well, we were talking about,
That's a good
I think,
question.
Red Handed. Yeah, and how they just got signed by Wondery. So
Okay.
I guess they're
Yeah.
leaving Audio Boom. So
Hmm.
anyway, but what's it been like to see the space evolve? You know, I know at some point in 2021, I think I like emailed you guys like 3 times, and then Lance hit me back and was like, "I'm so sorry, let's talk." But
That's
you
so
know,
funny. Yeah.
Whoops.
Well, because we get like
well,
there's-
it's totally okay. My pitch
Yeah.
was probably terrible. We've gotten a lot better since then, but
No. I think we, you know, we get a lot of emails that they just kind of slip by, but
yeah.
it's that community. We got a message. I believe a text message from a buddy in
oh yeah,
Mike Morford. I
yeah,
believe maybe.
Yep, it was
Um,
Morph.
Yeah, who was like, what's going on with Glassbox? You guys talk to them? I was like, no. And we searched our email, like, oh, they've emailed us. And I was like, oh, I guess we'll get on a call. Because he's like, yeah, you should check out what they're doing. Because we
We're out
always like
there.
to know,
Yeah.
And so that was a great, surprised that it missed, that it snuck by us the first couple times, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you guys get a ton of emails, and we hear it from pretty much everybody on the creator side. But I guess like when we had our first conversation, you guys as an organization were at a certain position to feel inclined to partner with us. Kind of what was that decision making process like? How has that experience been being partnered with Glassbox?
It was, man, it was like easy. It was just a matter of like
Yeah.
terms, because I think if people are starting podcasting, or if people have been doing podcasting for a long time, I remember Payne Lindsay at, I forget what CrimeCon it was, but I remember him saying like, hey, you got to bounce around, or something to that effect. Like, can't be married to one company. That was years ago. And I remember thinking like, I don't want to leave Audio Boom. And then situations happened and we had to leave Audio Boom. And then we signed up with another company and didn't work out. Signed up with another one, didn't work out. Signed up with another one. And all of a sudden we're like, this is working out. And, we before we signed with you, and then, sort of the floor falls out again. So that kind of always happens. But the difference between that and you guys was like how communicative you were, and how like personable, and you were coming from it from another approach. You had the media approach, but it was like almost coming from it from the inside out. It's like seeing it in a different way that was really appealing to us, and it wasn't just the cookie cutter like the cookie cutter styles that we or experiences that we've had before. And it just felt right. It felt like this was going to be the
Felt personal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
exactly
like
it.
you guys cared about our company.
That's amazing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys were a smaller team than some of the other companies that we had been with, and I mean, I think it worked out fine with the other companies. It just came to a natural point where you got to move on, or you got to see what else is out there. And I think we were in a pretty comfortable space when we met you, but we liked your approach, and you guys kind of come from an investment background, so you were looking at it like, podcasting and audio is going to get bigger. We want to be here with you. And for us, I remember thinking, well, it's a little bit of a risk because we are kind of comfortable where we are, and this is a very new company and a small team at this point. But you're saying all the right things, and the actions were there too, and so it was perfect for us. But I mean, it was a risk on our part, but it was also a risk for you guys too, and so it was kind of at the same time kind of came together nice for us.
Yeah.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it was a little bit of an inflection point for us too, because we were like jumping around to different platforms and stuff, and we didn't see a whole lot of growth, a whole lot of change. Like Tim said, it was like okay, but we were really searching for an opportunity to like get down to the nitty gritty, get down to the details, make small changes here, and you guys like brought all of those things to the table, and I mean, it's been nothing but growth since, really.
Yeah, we wanted more attentive partners, I think. We had gone through experiences at other networks and things like that, and sometimes we didn't get emails back, or it would take a week or something like that, and it's you're just like a number on a piece of paper to them, and that's not taking shots at any specific company. We love them all, honestly, but we did get responses back from you guys, and we felt like this was an active partner. And more than just like, oh, well, we'll see if we can get them some ads, this month or whatever.
I think when you said that it was a risk to join, when we're weighing it based on the past experiences of like similar reasons why we would have to leave other platforms for whatever reasons, like there was always like, there's that risk too. Okay, so we're okay over here. Do we want to risk like the same thing happening again and then having to do this all over again? Or just go with, I don't want to say like go with our gut, because it's not like, but go with what you guys had provided to us as far as the information and the personalization of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress, but fundamentally the way we think of ourselves as a media company, we're obviously immersed in podcasting and audio. I mean, all of us in this room, but at the same time, we're trying to figure out ways to add value, improve your IP, and see where we can go from here. So we're pumped about that. We love the slate, and we also like the future slate as well. So before we jump to that, I do think that there are some people to this day that just want to know a little bit more about the difference maybe between some of your flagship podcasts like Crawlspace and Missing. So maybe Jen, like as a producer, like editorially, what would you say is a difference between like those two shows?
I have less of a hand in Crawlspace production, but I've been producing Missing for a while. I'd characterize Crawlspace as more of like a talk show, or we've been throwing around variety show, but that sounds like a circus. So, we use Crawlspace to network with other creators who tell interesting stories. You guys are hilarious on there.
We tried.
Yeah, it's a little bit more quirky, I suppose. And Missing used to be Missing Maura Murray, and we decided to rebrand because I think you touched on this, Lance. Like kind of painted yourself into a corner by by.
I mean, it's a little limiting when you have a show that's got someone's specific name in the title.
Right, but
that was an early combo too. I remember,
Yeah.
how you guys split the feeds and you had multiple feeds and thinking through that.
Yeah, well, the other end of that was like an advocacy approach too, because you guys had built this large audience for this one case, and we saw great need out there for smaller, lesser known cases, and we wanted to cover those. So Missing's a little bit more serious. It's more, I don't want to say fact-based because your author's on there, obviously factual. But yeah, we follow a bullet point script and, speculate a little bit.
On our subscription show.
Yeah.
That's available for $4.99 a month.
There you go. Love the plug.
Nice.
On Apple. And if you're not an Apple user.
Yeah.
Well, the trailers are very different too. Like
Mhm.
Missing is a lot more, focused and serious, and Crawlspace has got a fun beat, at the very beginning. Like I actually really enjoy that trailer. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? We do still get people commenting that they want us to talk about Maura Murray still. Like, you guys aren't covering Maura Murray still. And we're like, what do you want us to? You literally want to hear us say the same thing. There's nothing new. Like, if there's something new, we'll totally talk about it. But they would rather us go over the facts again.
But that's literally the comment that we get sometimes. Is I would rather hear you guys go over the facts of that I already know in Maura's case than cover a new case.
Read me the dictionary.
All right, pal.
Or you could just scroll back, re-listen.
I mean, wow. In some ways, that's flattering, but it could also be a little limiting. That's what's the case.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I get it.
But
yeah.
it sounds like there's an opportunity there. So
Yeah. I mean, that case is always fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cases that really need our help. And I think Maura's case doesn't really need our help right now. The case is very well known. And Julie Murray is very active out there on social media, and so it's got a different presence now than when we entered the case.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even close. There was, there was very little, very little about it when we started. It was really all speculation and online stuff.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make sense of it all.
How have you guys seen? I know this is a big topic in the true crime space, but just how the way different podcasts approach, true crime essentially. How has that influenced some of your decision making on how you might tweak the show? Obviously, there are a lot of more, I guess more comedic takes on true crime out there that are wildly popular. Yet you guys seem to kind of keep a very focused path. How do you kind of filter that noise, I guess, is the best way to put it.
We follow our hearts. I mean, kind of, though. I mean, I think we do ultimately what's interesting to us. And I think that's always a good North Star, to have. If something's interesting to you personally, it's a good chance it's going to be interesting to other people, or funny, for example. And so I think that's kind of all I can say about that. I mean, there are times where it's like, this guest said something. I really want them to stop with their answer now so I can make this joke. And then sometimes it goes on a little too long, and then you try the joke anyway, and it doesn't work.
That's what
So-
editing's for, Tim.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
So very thankful for editing.
I don't know. We started with a very serious show, and
Right.
we're like behind the scenes, like I think we're pretty funny people, but we started with a very serious show. So then it was the same thing that we did to ourselves by accident with the merchandise too, because people would ask us, like from a business sense, do you guys sell merchandise? Do you make money on merchandise? In the beginning, we're like, what are we supposed to make? Like little toy Saturns that are Maura's car, like what T-shirts with Maura's face on it, and then what? We can't make money on that. Like we're not gonna make money. And it's like weird that someone would ask that. So it's kind of the same with the comedy. Like, we branched out into Crawlspace, and then over the years with Crawlspace, we've started sprinkling in more lighter episodes, like
Sure.
where we can have a couple of laughs and everything, because you need that.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of shows out there that handle the comedy really, really well, and you know them because they're very successful and popular. And there are ones that do it terribly, and you don't know them because they suck. Because they just are terrible people for making, for like making fun of people that are in a tragic situation, and then they
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly think like the true magic from Missing Maura Murray and later Missing in Crawlspace is the rapport between you guys. It seemed podcasting or like audio in general is a very intimate experience. It's like usually people are listening with their earbuds in, and listening to Tim and Lance. It feels like you're sitting at a round table with your friends and discussing like a really interesting mystery. And I think like that's where the conversational style really like hits the ground running.
And that's what the audience wants in the end of the day, right? It's not an easy judgment call. And I guess the reason we keep harping on this, just for context, is that, of all our partners, like different like thematic categories, the comedians, pure play entertainment shows, they don't have to balance this, whereas you all do. But I think at the end of the day, the audience and the public needs to know. So it's ultimately just your editorial discretion. So I mean, for what it's worth, we are biased, but we think you guys just do it like superbly. So that's
Well,
it.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, moving on. One thing that I did want to also talk about today was the future of Crawlspace, and without biasing or slanting that at all, one thing that we definitely wanted to talk about today was Dark Valley, and we wanted to get like kind of an update from you, and maybe just for the audience out there, just more insight into like what that podcast is about and where you see that branching into.
Yeah, actually, I have an excellent segue into this.
You just ruined it.
Yeah, I know. Damn it.
Now it's being built up. Now I like it.
I also want to set Jen up for this. When she came aboard and did the her production work on Suitcase Jane Doe way back, when we started developing Dark Valley and we knew that we wanted this to be a separate feed, we were telling Jen, like, okay, well, what's your role? Like, and we were always brainstorming the role. And she was always like, well, I'm not going to host. I'm never going to host this. We're going to have to find a host. We're like, thinking about the work that she did on Suitcase Jane Doe was always where my head was at, which was like, but like when you were on with Suitcase Jane Doe, like it was good. Like you're so good, like so engaging. And then, of course, she's the host of this great of
falsely modest. Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be behind the scenes, but I guess it's easier. Well, now my segue is super ruined.
We can still pretend.
Yeah.
editing.
Well, I was thinking about like part of your question, David, was how are we trying new things in terms of like style and content and stuff. And I mean, I think the genre has grown a lot. Our audience is intelligent and they've evolved, and they expect like a higher level of production too. So I think because of that, I was branching into like a more narratively focused storytelling that had a lot of interviews, a lot of clips, a lot of layers to it, some sound design and stuff. So I think it's like just operating on a different level this time around, but we're very excited about it.
We're excited about that too, but if you had to summarize, compactly, exactly what you think it brings to the table, what is Dark Valley about?
Oh, no. Dark Valley is America's unknown serial killer. In New England in the 1980s, a series of about 8 murders, the last of which his victim named Jane Borowski, survived. She survived 27 stab wounds while 7 months pregnant, and she's here today to tell her story. So Dark Valley is basically about all of these women, all of these cases. It's very victim focused, and Jane is kind of leading us through this investigation alongside myself.
I know that some shows will say, this. I know that some shows will say that this is speaking for the victims, but it's a really rare, unique opportunity to actually have one of the victims who survived, and Jen has like a really close relationship with now, and have that person like actually be doing it. She is actually going to the sites where these bodies were found. She's going to visit the state police when they call in another family member because they want to tell them something. And then Jen and Jane go. Like, I'm just saying, like, sometimes you get the work, or sometimes you get the message that the show is like speaking for the victims.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear it and you're like, oh, well, is it? Or is that just like the tagline that you put on there? This is literally doing it. It's really remarkable.
Thank you. It's an inverse approach, I think. Usually we hear serial killer stories and we're speculating about, usually they're solved, the cases that you talk about. So we're speculating on the killer's childhood and what trauma he faced and blah, blah, blah. And while that's interesting, and I don't shame anybody for being interested in that, I think we're approaching this the other way in. So through the victims, through the women, what were their lives like? What were they doing on a daily basis? And what does that tell us about the person who abducted and murdered them?
And how long have you been working on this? I mean,
7 years?
It's been a while.
A million?
Yeah.
2.5? Almost?
Yeah. Like
2.5 years?
And it's launching when?
Probably June. Nick?
To be determined.
TBD. But
Yeah.
either way, it's got to be pretty exciting and thrilling to kind of see that to fruition.
For sure.
And Jane has another podcast, which is also a Glassbox podcast called Invisible Tears, which focuses on recovery and trauma for victims, which is a nice kind of foil to Dark Valley as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we were really excited when her team brought that like to the table and said we're going to do this. Like, it's such a great companion piece.
Yeah.
It's such a great companion piece to the, I don't want to say like the hard-boiled investigation one, but like, this one's like, it's an investigation one. It's done in a different way, but no one ever deals with like the PTSD after that. No one talks as much as they should about that. So it's an awesome show.
Absolutely. And Jane's so candid on that show.
And I just want to say our hesitancy to give a release date isn't because of like production issues or anything like that. We are just waiting on certain things to happen before we can.
The perfect segue, it seems.
The perfect segue.
Yeah.
Yes,
There
the
you go.
unbroken segue.
Yeah.
You'll never find the perfect
Man.
segue.
One of these days.
Well, I can just say that we're obviously super pumped to, kind of help you market that, monetize that with our brand partners, and very confident that we'll mutually blow it out of the water. So we're excited about that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, very exciting.
Very cool. Jen, Lance, and Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. We can't wait to continue to grow the value of Crawlspace and Missing and your entire slate, including Dark Valley. For any of our listeners who are true crime fans, listen to Crawlspace or Missing on all podcast platforms. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Business of Sound. This show is produced by Erica Miranda and Nick Kastner. There's a new episode every Thursday, and if you find it in your heart, please leave us a 5-star review to help support the show. Also, follow Glassbox Media on either Instagram or LinkedIn, or better yet, both. Thanks again. We'll see you in other episodes.